Greetings, curious minds. Welcome to Paranormal M, your gateway to stories that challenge the limits of understanding. Hit that subscribe button and enable notifications to embark on this mysterious journey with us. Enjoy the wonder. A spirit guiding another spirit. Question. Shortly after my aunt passed away, she came to visit me. We weren't all too close. Only towards her death, she expressed to me that she wished that she had gotten to know me better. Cancer, she knew she was going. And I could feel she really meant that. She came into the room from a very white, bright light. Took up the entire wall. It looked endless in all directions. She sat down in a chair next to me and held my hand. Without moving her lips, she spoke to me. She says, "Hello, how are you? So nice to see you. You're beautiful. I know about the pain in your heart. Please, heal your heart." I could respond to her in the same way. She was smiling. She didn't look sick at all. She also said that she was sorry. I knew what she meant by that. Her daughter and her granddaughters were very cruel to me growing up, and they said hurtful and untruthful things about me to her. She squeezed my hand and said, "I love you. It's time for me to go." When she had first entered the room, she was led in by a man over 6 feet tall, wearing what looked like a long white robe. He had dark black hair and a short-length dark facial hair. Only for one split second when I saw him, I wondered who he was. Towards the end of our conversation, I remember trying to think who he was. Then I knew I didn't know him. When she told me she had to go, it was like he was telling her it was time to go. She stood up. He held out his hand. They held hands and walked away together into the light. The light was there the entire conversation. So was he. A blessing to see my aunt, of course. To be allowed this. I know why she came to me this way. I think he was an angel. Maybe he was her angel. With most instances like this, it's all up to interpretation, person to person. If he was an angel, I think I know which angel it was. Does anyone have an idea who this man could be? I believe a ghost cat is in my house. So my family moved to this house about 3 or 4 years ago. The first time I was there after coming back from school, I kept hearing these meows. I only ever hear these meows when I'm at my parents' house. I remember the first time I heard it. It was really high-pitched and didn't sound like my cat's. It's almost like a piercing meow, echoing. It's hard to explain, but it just didn't sound right. I was upstairs in my bedroom and I went downstairs where my mom was sitting on the couch with our 2 cats. I asked her if she heard that sound. She looked confused. She hadn't heard anything, in fact. Then I asked if the cats had just been meowing. My mom said no, and they weren't. They were cuddled up and asleep on the couch. Sometimes the meows sounded like they were in the same room as me, and sometimes it sounded like it was coming from upstairs or somewhere else. Sometimes it sounded so near and loud that it freaked me out. Sometimes my cats react, sometimes they don't. I often hear the meows coming from upstairs. and my cats do like to stand and stare at and paw at the door to the attic. But what cemented this to me was there was a ghost cat in the house was that one night I left my door cracked for the cats and I got in bed. I closed my eyes and I lay there. And then I feel a cat hop on my bed. You know that feeling. You can feel their weight walking and then settle at the end of the bed. My cats liked the spot by the window. I don't think of it at the time, but my door was only cracked slightly so that my cats could push it open to get through. I didn't hear it squeak open, nor was it opened any wider than when I closed it. Anyway, with my eyes half closed, I reached down to where I felt the movement to give my cat a pet and a scratch. Except my hand lands on nothing. I open my eyes fully, then I look at the end of my bed, feeling around. Nothing, no one. I was so beyond confused. I had felt a cat there. I really had. So I lay back down and I try to go to sleep. Except I feel movement again. My heart totally jumped up and I shot straight up and grabbed my glasses from my bedside table. I turn on my lamp and there's no one there. I went downstairs and the cats were all in fact downstairs. Anyway, after that, still freaked out, I spoke out into the world, hoping the cat's spirit would understand. I don't like when you do that. You're welcome to hang around here, but it makes me uncomfortable when you do that. It didn't happen again, though, but I still often hear those strange echoing meows. I've been beginning to see flashes of a black cat around my ankles. I only ever experienced this too at my parents' house. I don't know if it's my eyes playing tricks on me, but sometimes I swear I look down and I see this random black cat near my feet, usually walking. Then as soon as I notice the apparition, it's gone. My shadow turned into something else. This happened in 2012. I was going to a trade school full-time, and my child was a toddler at that time. I lived with my mother, so it was just us three. We stayed in a duplex. The layout was weird. The 2-car garage was in front of the front door, and the house was towards the back. The garage and house weren't attached. There was a space between the house and the garage. In that space, you could access my bedroom through a sliding door, which was technically my window. Then, next to my window and door was my mother's room. She had a basic window. The door to access the garage was facing my bedroom window. That being said, it had a porch light that brightened up that space. However, due to a stalker of mine, long story, that light was busted, and my front door light was busted too. It took a while for them to be fixed. Wasn't really a priority for my landlord, otherwise known as my uncle. Now let's get to the story. One day I stayed pretty late after class to make up a few assignments. By the time I left, it was dark outside. I'd say around 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. I pulled into my driveway and noticed my mother's car wasn't there. I usually call her if it's dark outside and ask if she could open the door for me so I wouldn't be scared walking up to the door. That night, it was pitch black. And, well, I'm a pussy. I sucked it up and started walking to my door. I'm struggling to get the key in the lock because it's dark and my phone is deep in my purse. Finally, I turn the key and push the door open. My right foot enters first. Left foot is still on the porch. My right hand is feeling for the light switch so I can bring my entire body inside. This happened all too fast, but felt like forever. As I'm still struggling to find the light switch, I can see my shadow on the curtains in the living room. The street light behind me is shining into my house lightly. I'm freaking out and I'm intensely focused on my shadow when my heart sinks into my asshole. In that second, I see my shadow lift off of the curtain and take an actual form. It was still a dark, shadowy looking thing, but it wasn't 2D anymore. It looked like someone was now standing in front of the curtain, very still. I realized I already flipped the switch, but no lights came on. I don't know why I kept flicking them up and down. I was panicking. My brain told me I should move my body, and if that figure moves with me, it's just my shadow and my fearful imagination. I moved, but that motherfucker did not. I quickly said, "Fuck," slammed the door and ran back to my car, making a weird noise out loud. As soon as I got in my car, I started crying uncontrollably. I immediately called my best friend, trying to frantically explain what I just witnessed. She was shocked and told me to come straight to her house. She stayed on the phone with me until I pulled into a driveway. She calmed me down and told me to call my mother. I called and told her to come to my friend's house first, and we'd follow her to my house. She arrived after 30 minutes or so. Once we got back to my house, my mother pulled out her holy water and she opened the front door. She switched the light on and it worked. I yelled, "I swear it wouldn't turn on earlier." She said a prayer, and we followed along. When I entered my house, I didn't feel that horrid feeling I had felt just an hour before. It was so strange. My mom called a priest that we know personally. He came by a couple days later and blessed our entire home. Haven't had any issues there ever since. The first time I saw something. Back in 2012, I was going to school for a certain trade. My parents and child were out for that evening, and I stayed late at school to finish up some missing hours. We used to live in a duplex. The two-car garage was detached and was in the front. The actual house was in the back. When you're walking to the front door, there's a big gap in between the house and the garage. It's a grassy area. My bedroom window was a sliding glass door. You know, the ones that are usually used for apartment balconies. Yeah, anyway, in this gap between my window and the garage had a porch light. Porch in air quotes. Hope this gives you an idea of what it looks like. I had a crazy psycho ex that terrorized me and my family, which is a whole different story for another time in a different sub. But this is relevant. Months earlier, he busted the garage light and he busted our front porch light to the house. He wanted it pitch black outside at night so we couldn't see that he was there or who was trying to break in. Back to the summer evening in 2012. I came home and parked in the driveway. My parents' car wasn't there, so I figured that they were out getting ice cream with my child or something. I grab my phone and I start walking up to my house. I'm scared of the dark, so I have my phone light on to see where I'm going. As I put the key in, I notice the street light shining on my door. It gave me a tiny bit of comfort knowing that it wasn't extremely pitch black. As the door unlocks, I push the door open and put my right foot inside with my left foot still on the welcome mat. I'm feeling for the light switch to turn on the light in the entryway. My house was completely dark, so I didn't want to step inside until there was a lot of light. As I'm doing this, I notice the street light shining in and I see the shadow on the living room curtains. I'm starting to panic because I'm flicking the light switch, but it's not turning on. It's only been 30 to 40 seconds max, and I'm feeling like 20 minutes have gone by. In that moment, I had this sudden burning urge to move my head and body to see if my shadow would move with me. I don't know why, I just needed validation that it was my own shadow. I'm swaying my head side to side in the most exaggerated way, and what the fuck do you know, it doesn't fucking move. Once I noticed it, that it wasn't moving with my motions, I saw this quote-unquote shadow go from a two-dimensional thing on my curtain to a four-dimensional body. It's like it lifted off the curtain, coming forward very slowly, and became a body of a person, a silhouette of a person, but it was black. The hairs on the back of my neck jumped the fuck off my body, and I yelled a short "fuck no," then slammed the door and ran back to my car screaming like a bitch. Kinda just like I saw a big roach and scurried away. I was horrified. As soon as I got into the car, I bursted out in tears. I had this overwhelming feeling of fear. Called my best friend at the time, crying hysterically. She believed me instantly and told me to come over. As soon as I got there, I told her exactly how I'm telling you. I finally called my parents and told them what happened. They agreed to meet me at my friend's house, and they followed me back to the home, but this time with my friend in the car with me. My mom walks in first with her holy water ready. I'm right behind her. She opens the door, and lo and behold, the light turns on normally, nothing out of place. The eerie feeling is gone too. My mom blessed the house anyways. I asked my parents to get our priest to come bless the entire house. I haven't had anything bad happen after that, and I'll never forget the feeling that I had seen my shadow not moving with me. It gives me a nasty feeling. Obviously, this is a retelling of the last story, but from a different subreddit, and with a slightly different recollection, so I thought I'd put it in here as well. On to the next story. My child saw me, but knew it wasn't me. Don't want to add a bunch of irrelevant stuff, but I want to give you all an idea of why things are the way they are. Our child is about to be 11. Our central air has been broken for a year now, so we have 2 window units. One big unit in the living room, and 1 unit upstairs in me and my husband's bedroom. My child doesn't sleep in their own room because unfortunately it's the hottest room in the house without AC. Haven't installed a unit in my child's room because their window opens sideways, and most units only fit windows that open up and down, which is only in my bedroom. With all that being said, on really hot evenings, we usually sleep downstairs because it's cooler, but now that school's back, I let my child sleep in our bed. Husband sleeps on the couch because he works nights. Easier to just plop down. And I sleep upstairs with my child because I'm pregnant and obviously need AC. The sleep setting in my bedroom. No night lights in the room at all. Just a tad bit of the echo show illuminating the room. Barely. You could literally still trip, stub your pinky toe, and fall to your death because it's pretty damn dark. This particular night, though, husband and I stayed downstairs watching movies and spending time. Our child is sound asleep upstairs in her bedroom. We are horrible night owls. It's 5 a.m. already and we're watching Halloween, the 2018 one, on the couch. 6 a.m. comes around and the alarm goes off to wake our child for school. Finally, our kiddo comes downstairs, and this is when we're told of the experience. I'll put it in quotes to have it come from their perspective. "Mommy, I saw you in the room last night." "What are you talking about?" "Yeah, you were standing in the bedroom door, slumped over a bit with your legs apart and staring at me with a weird, freaky smile." I'm genuinely confused, but interested. It scared me so bad, but I thought you were just messing with me, like trying to scare me. So I said, Mommy, okay, you can stop, you're freaking me out, but you kept looking at me with that creepy smile and you never moved. Did I or it say anything? No. And it's weird because I knew it wasn't you, but I didn't want to move. I wanted to get up and turn on the light. I didn't want to look away, and it charge at me or something. I look at my husband and I say, I've read so many stories about this happening to people that I definitely believe it. Was this right now when you woke up or what? Oh no, it was around 1 a.m. because I saw the time on the Echo, and I thought it was 7 a.m. and that's when I saw it. You. It felt like it stared at me for 10 minutes if I could guess. And then all of a sudden it disappeared into thin air. But in a weird way, like black mist floating away right in front of me. Right before it dissolved, I made the sign of a cross and prayed for it to go away. Then it did. I was so scared. I didn't feel like it wanted to kill me or anything, but I was definitely scared. My mom and her ghosts. So a bit of background first. My mom and her family are from Indonesia, specifically a city called Bandung. Her father and mother weren't poor, but weren't terribly wealthy either. She and her sister grew up there in the 1960s to late 70s. They had a house in the mountains that they would go to during holiday breaks. The house wasn't new, possibly around 10 years old at the time that this particular incident happened, and had about a 1-acre big backyard. The yard had a few trees and an old covered well that my mom and sister liked to play around. The well was supposedly much older than the house itself, but no one knew how old. At this time, my grandmother told me that my mom was probably around 3 to 4 years old and her sister about 6 or 7. My grandma, who loves gardening, was out in the backyard planting some flowers and watching the girls chase each other around. She eventually went inside for a drink, with her elder daughter following her in. She asked her eldest, my aunt, about her younger sister. My grandmother, aunt, mom, I'm just going to say that, okay, the story is saying that GM stands for grandmother, A stands for aunt, and M stands for mom, so I will read them as such. Grandmother. Where's your younger sister? Aunt. Oh, she's out there playing with her friends. Grandmother. Friends? What friends? My grandmother was confused because there were no neighbors nearby, and the closest house wasn't for miles. She walked back outside to investigate. Near the old well, she saw her younger daughter, my mom, running around in circles, seemingly chasing something and laughing. My grandma was very sensitive to spiritual things, so what she saw next, she told me, was unforgettable. She walked closer to get a better look, and she saw 4 figures beside her daughter, all laughing and running around with her. One figure in particular really stood out. She said it was a young boy dressed in suspenders and a hat, but his face was slightly obscured, like something had rubbed it out. The other 3 figures seemed to be much smaller and harder to see than he was. She told me later that she had a bad feeling about them, so she called my mom back inside. Once inside, she asked my mom who she had been playing with. My mom insisted that they were her friends. The next day, my grandma and grandpa kept a close watch on the 2 girls as they went out to play in the yard. My grandma had asked the maid about the previous tenants who stayed on the property that afternoon, and the maid said that was 30 years before there was a family, and they had a young boy. The boy died after falling into this well. My grandma had been told before that they bought the house that the well was filled and covered, and it should be bolted into place. She had a very bad feeling when she saw my mom peel away from my sister toward the well. She grabbed her daughter and ran to the well, calling her husband after her. My grandpa grabbed the cover, and sure enough, it hadn't been bolted down, and the well was still hollow. My grandma called a service the next day to fill the well and secure the cover so that it couldn't be moved. And she told me that my mom was sad after that. She couldn't see her friends anymore. However, to this day, my mom and her sister both believed that they had been interacting with ghosts. And even my grandmother said the same until her death. My mom had a special proclivity towards the supernatural. A new house has its own surprises. It was 1999, and my brother was about to turn 1 year old. I was 6 at the time, and my mom was looking for a new house to move into since her family was growing. Her parents were moving in with us to take care of my brother, who was very sickly, and our current house was too small for everybody. My mom went to go meet with the realtor and see a house while my dad was at work and I was at school. Brother was at daycare. The realtor took her to a beautiful stone and brick house in a pretty nice neighborhood. It had a big backyard with a beautiful landscape and lovely wooden and carpeted floors. It was a truly gorgeous house. Something about that house made my mom uneasy. She couldn't tell why, but being in the house felt like someone was watching her. She said that she got chills when she came upstairs to the bedroom. The realtor proudly showed her to a girl's bedroom decorated in lavender with a floor-length mirror on the closet door. My mom said that the moment that she saw that mirror, she froze on the spot. She called the realtor back. "Mom, I think I'm done here." Realtor, visibly confused. "Really? I thought you'd like this one. It's beautiful." My mom, "I'd like to leave. I really don't think I want this house." Realtor, "May I ask what turned you off to this house?" Mother, Has anyone died here?" The realtor shuffled through her notes on the history of the house. "No. At least I wasn't informed of anything like that happening here." Mom, "I think someone has committed suicide in this room. I can see someone in that mirror." Realtor, looking at the mirror, "I don't see anyone, but if it makes you feel better, we can move on to another house." My mom agreed and left the house. She described to me when I was much older that the figure she saw in the mirror was that of a teenage girl wearing a nightgown. She had tied herself up to the ceiling fan with a sheet. The realtor apparently got back to her the next week and told her that she did some digging about the family who lived there before. The house was a foreclosure, so it wasn't that easy to find them. The girl my mother saw was 14 years old when she killed herself. Apparently, her father gambled away their money and the bank seized their house shortly after she died. Needless to say, we did not move into that house, and my mom was never liking floor-length mirrors since. Dennis the Menace. This happened to me and my 3 roommates about 4 to 5 years back when we were in college. My roommates and I lived on a campus in a brand new building that was just opened less than a year ago at the time of the story. Our apartment was a suite containing 2 bedrooms with 2 beds and 2 bathrooms connected by a kitchen and a living area in the middle. I moved into the apartment in the middle of the spring semester, after a falling out with the previous roommate in another building. Shortly after I moved in, my new roommate sat with me in the living area and told me about a poltergeist that they had dubbed Dennis. Dennis moved things remotely, but had never at that point caused serious harm. Thought it was a little scary at first, but incredibly I found myself getting used to it. Occasionally I'd see something small, like a cup sliding across the counter or a bottle of ketchup tipping over, or even a chair sliding out from underneath the table. But there wasn't anything too major. That is, until the end of the second semester, when it seemed Dennis was becoming more and more active, and that it was targeting one of my roommates. One evening, close to finals week, I came home to my roommate, C, from here on. C was pale and shivering next to the stove. "Dennis just tried to kill me." Was rather short, so she often needed to help to get things from high shelves and cupboards in the kitchen. Whenever I was around, I'd help her because I'm pretty tall and I understand the plight of the vertically challenged, but she was alone this time. "See, I tried to get some sauce," pointing at the cupboard above the stove. "So I grabbed a chair to climb, and then suddenly I felt the chair move underneath my feet." She spoke quickly and breathlessly, so I moved her to a seated position on the chair and tried to calm her down. Me: "How did it move? Did it feel like it slipped or something?" "No. Felt like it was being pushed. It moved way faster than if I had slipped. I was lucky enough to jump down before it started moving too fast." I encouraged her to lay down on the couch until the other roommates were done with classes. She relayed the same story to them when they came home. We decided to simply watch out and text each other immediately after another incident happened. I moved out after that last semester due to my participation in my school's program, but kept in touch with the other roommates. I ended up still living in the same building but on a different floor. When we came back for the new school year, I met up with her for lunch at the school's common area. We were sitting and waiting for our food when she told me the latest update in the Dennis saga. This is her. "I was the first one back before the semester started. I was moving my stuff in, and I'd gotten some holy water that my mom gave me from the church." Her mom was a super religious person. "I put the water in a cup on the coffee table, and I was moving my stuff back into my bedroom when it happened. There was a loud noise like something was shaking. It was so strange because I couldn't feel it in my room. But when I came to the living room, it looked like an earthquake was happening. I grabbed as many electronics and fragile items as I could and stuffed them into my bedroom." Me: "Did it stop?" Her: "No. Not until I said the prayer that the priest told me to say. I think that bringing the holy water really upset Dennis." We all wondered who or what was haunting this apartment, and why. There were two prevailing theories. One was before the building was erected, there were a series of old auction houses that were selling slaves during the Civil War era. We suspected that the poltergeist might have been a result of a spirit of a slave, but there wasn't much credence behind this theory. The second theory was one that I personally believed due to the fact that plenty of other school buildings around us were haunted in the same way. My school consisted of two campuses, the medical school campus and the general education campus. However, the medical school campus was much older than the general campus and used to be surrounded by hospitals run by the university. Less than 1 block away from where my apartment now stands was an old mental institution. That building was turned into housing for the honors college students. One of my friends who lived there described a similar, although slightly more intense haunting as the one that happened to my roommates and me. We learned later that most of the buildings on the block were used as part of the mental institution itself. Things seemed to calm down after that incident, and she kept the holy water around just in case. We never knew for sure what happened to Dennis, but he really was a menace. Insane. If you listened to my Dennis the Menace story, then you know that I used to live with a poltergeist dubbed Dennis. Well, this is about a friend of mine and a response to my story. My friend Kay, from here on, lived in the Honors College half of about a block away from my building. The Honors College was a repurposed building that used to be part of a hospital that surrounded my university. Kay told me that the Honors College was a much more traditional college dorm-style building than my building, and that students lived in rooms rather than suites, consisting of a single bed, and the bathrooms and other facilities were communal. They all shared a laundry room that was located in the basement level of that building. The Honors College was part of the hospital wing that contained mentally ill patients, and this fact was reinforced by the presence of small rooms sealed shut by heavy steel doors that were painted the same cold shade of white as the rest of the hall. The rooms were mostly located in the basement, the first levels of the building. Most of the doors were cemented shut and heavily painted over, as if the building were trying to ignore its past. Kay told me that on full moon nights, she tried to find other places outside of the building to sleep, because as she lived alone in her room on the first floor, she could hear screaming, banging, and scratching echoing from down the hall. One night close to midterms, she was taking her laundry down to the basement. While she was down there, she could hear a faint sound over the rumble of the washing machine. It sounded like a voice calling for someone. Curiosity was getting the better of her. She stopped the machine early and listened to make sure the voice wasn't calling for her. Well, it wasn't, but it was saying something else. "Let me out, I'm not crazy," over and over reverberated over the halls. It got louder and louder and was accompanied by the sound of items crashing on the ground. The walls felt like they were shaking, and then came a cacophony of other voices that seemed to come from the sealed rooms. She nearly crapped her pants. She abandoned her wet clothes and sped out of the building. She showed up in the lobby of my apartment and asked if she could stay with me and my roommate. I was surprised because she looked like something was chasing her. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to get her to calm down. "You know how you said you had a ghost in your old apartment?" she asked, still heaving. I had already moved out by then. "Yeah," I said. "Well, have I got a story for you." A nighttime ride. My grandmother told me this story when I was around 12 or 13 years old. She was always very sensitive to paranormal things, so she had tons of stories. Now for some background. If you haven't seen my previous stories, my mom's parents and my mom are all Indonesian. My grandparents immigrated to the States after my brother was born to help take care of him when he was a baby. As I got older, my grandma noticed that I liked ghost stories, so she often told me ones that happened to her. This one happened when she and my grandpa were a young, newly married couple. It was nighttime, and my grandparents were riding home from their jobs at the pharmacy on a motorcycle. The road, for the most part, was pretty deserted and quiet, which made for a nice ride home. They were about halfway back when my grandma suddenly told my grandpa, who was driving, to stop. "What? What is it?" He had screeched to a near stop at a streetlight that was on the side of the road. My grandma was pale and staring straight ahead. She finally worked up the courage to say something. "Grandmother, do you need some help?" My grandpa confused, was looking all around to see who might she be talking to, but he couldn't see anyone. "Who are you talking to?" "What, you don't see her?" "See who?" "The woman there. She's holding a baby and the baby's crying. I think they're bleeding. We need to do something." "What are you talking about? There's no woman and there's no baby. You're just tired. We need to go home." He started up the motorcycle again and began to speed away, but my grandma kept looking behind her at the woman and child. My grandpa insisted that she was seeing things due to her exhaustion from work, but she was convinced otherwise. My grandparents found out later that the woman and child were victims of a hit and run on the same street where she saw them. And at my grandmother's pleading, the two of them went later to place flowers at that site. A Visitor in the Night. When I was 12 or 13 years old, I played the piano, and I was a regular on the concert circuit in my hometown. I had recitals about twice a year, and it was close to the time of my Christmas recital concert in late December. My grandpa was very ill in the hospital. It was found that he had colon cancer a few days before, and he was in treatment. We didn't know how advanced the cancer had been at the time. I came with my whole family, mom, dad, younger sister, grandma, and brother, to visit him in the hospital. But I won't talk too much about the visit here, since it's still painful to talk about. We went home that evening, feeling pretty good about everything and optimistic that my grandpa would get better and come home. But something happened that night. It was 3 a.m. and the doorbell rang, along with a knocking sound at the door. My dad went downstairs to see who the heck would visit at 3 in the morning. I don't remember much being a sleep-deprived preteen, but my mom described to me what happened after I was fully awake. My dad looked around the front porch to see who might have rung the bell, and after being unsuccessful, he closed the door and bolted it, complaining about ding-dong ditchers. My mom said that she saw the apparition of her father ascend the stairs and enter his room at the top of the stairs. My grandma, who had been asleep, also said that she could see him enter their bedroom, and later my parents' room. My mom was acting very strangely for the rest of that day. For context, my mom is usually pretty lax about most things. She prefers doing things like sewing and reading and knitting to sitting around and watching television. Her father, however, was a very severe person who always enjoyed working with his hands, repairing things and tinkering with electronics. But his favorite thing to do was watching action shows like Walker, Texas Ranger, or MacGyver, which my mom usually disliked. That day, my mom was sitting around watching my grandpa's favorite shows and talking to her mom in a strange manner. They usually used Bahasa Indonesian to talk to each other. My grandma told me that she was asking her things that she would have no idea about, or things that only she and my grandpa talked about. My grandma, concerned, asked if my mom was feeling okay. But all my mom could say was she felt as if her brain was not her own. My dad even suggested that she go to bed early when she complained of a massive headache later that evening. She said she had a very strange dream, as if her father was leaving her, and she couldn't sleep any longer. She tried to call the hospital as soon as she woke up. She found out that her father was dead. It was only a few days till Christmas, and since then, she could never celebrate Christmas the same way ever again. a shadow of himself. It was the late 90s, probably 96 or 97, and I was 4 years old. My uncle on my dad's side was ill, and he came to live with my family because we lived closer to the hospital. Now, my uncle was chronically ill since he was a child, so his being sick wasn't anything new. He stayed in the room adjacent to my parents, and across the hall from my room. My uncle spoiled me whenever he could. He couldn't have children of his own, so he took whatever chance there was to spend time with me. Before his illness got worse, he and his then wife used to watch over me at their house while my parents worked. He was cheerful and vibrant, even amidst his kidney disease. So much so that my dad used to joke that he was the more attractive brother. But back then, in about 1996, he was slowly wasting away. He used to watch television in the living room until my mom came home, but after a while he could barely get out of bed. Eventually, he passed in 1997 of kidney cancer. Shortly after the funeral, my mom recalled coming home from work after picking me up from preschool. She saw the garage door was open, but no cars were in the garage. She assumed maybe my dad was home, or maybe he forgot to close it. But no. She walked inside the house, leaving me outside with the car running just in case someone was inside. But not before alerting our next-door neighbor to watch me. What she saw next was shocking. In the living room, the television was on and flipping through channels, as if someone was finding something to watch. The previously locked guest bedroom that my uncle was staying in was wide open, as was my bedroom door. She then saw what appeared to be my uncle sitting on the couch in the living room. "What are you doing here?" she asked the apparition cautiously. The figure turned around, and for a split second, she could see my uncle, his face twisted into a shocked and puzzled expression that mirrored her own. But shortly after, he vanished. My mom hurried back out of the house to where I was with the neighbor. She thanked her and stuffed me back into my seat, drove me to my cousin's house who lived nearby, and called my dad. "I just saw your brother," she said breathlessly when he answered. "I was told that my parents and grandparents ordered a priest to come to our house to exorcise a spirit that Sunday, while I stayed with my cousin and his wife. The priest told my mom that since the spirit was of my uncle, a normally mild-mannered and kind man, that the spirit wasn't malevolent. I don't remember much of what happened after that, but I do have a small memory of him coming back to visit me in my dreams." The Chained. This happened quite a few years back in the pre-Katrina New Orleans. My family and I lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and for a few summers we made regular trips to New Orleans. The food, the culture, the music, and vibrancy of the people were very attractive to my parents, and they wanted to show that to us kids. My brother, sister, and I loved going there for the few summers leading up to Katrina. I was only around middle school age, probably 11 years old, and my brother was 6 and my sister was 4. This incident happened during our many outings to the French Quarter. I remembered reading a pamphlet about haunted tours in New Orleans, of the old French-style crypts and cemeteries in the area. The stories of voodoo queens and vampires and black magic fascinated me. These things were running through my head as we walked along the road leading up to Bourbon Street, with my brother following me closely. My brother was and is a reserved kid. He never really let it be known when he was bothered and tended to bottle up his emotions until he exploded, even when he was a child. So his sudden grabbing of my hand as we made it to the intersection was slightly shocking to say the least. "What's wrong?" I said, looking at him with concern. He was pale and shaking like a leaf, his big round eyes focused straight ahead. "I heard someone," he said. Normally, hearing someone in the middle of a busy city like New Orleans would be nothing of concern, but at this time, the street was misty, quiet, and still. There was no one as far as anyone could see, save for the tiny Pomeranians that were yapping at the window in the nearby townhouse. I looked across the street at the sprawling, ancient-looking cemetery with its cold, white mausoleum and grim-looking angels that presided over the dead. "What do you think it was?" I asked. "I heard something heavy, like chains were being dragged. And I heard a voice that sounded like an old man. He was saying something, but I don't know. Next thing I knew, I saw a bony white hand reaching over my shoulder. I felt like if I looked back at whoever or whatever that was, that they'd get me," he said in a strangled voice. He squeezed my hand so tightly that my fingers felt like they would lose circulation. "Don't worry, you'll be okay." I honestly had no idea what else I could say to him besides that. I ushered him to walk ahead of me as I pulled my mom back to explain to her what happened. She didn't say anything to my dad or my sister and instead took my brother and positioned him at the front. My brother was quiet for the rest of the day, his face pale, and his lips were drawn tight. My best guess as to what he heard or saw would be one of those ghosts who haunted the quarter, but as to the specter's identity, I had no idea. The painting. When I was 5 years old, my family and I moved into a new house. My dad wanted to buy some paintings to decorate our new home. There was one painting that he bought at an antique shop that hung just over the stairs. It was of a girl with dark curls dressed in linen robes. She was standing against what appeared to be a metal door, holding a spear in both hands behind her back. Her brow was low and heavy, and her feet bare and her posture was stiff. Immediately, I sensed a weird air about this painting. About a month after the painting was hung above the stairs, I saw something cross her face, like a shadow. Her normally expressionless visage was now smirking. An evil-looking half-grin appeared across her lips. And maybe it was just me, but I swore I saw her hands tighten on the spear behind her back. Frightened, I ran as quickly as I could up the stairs into my bedroom, where I hid underneath the covers for almost an hour. A little while later, I peeked out from behind my bedroom door at the painting at the end of the hall, making sure that she was still smiling. This time, I saw her dark eyes meet mine. I yelped and slammed the door shut and didn't come out for the rest of the day. That night, I dreamt about her. The dream was so vivid and real that I remember it to this day. In my dream, I saw the painting, but this time she was gone. All that was visible beyond the frame was the bronze-colored door that was behind her. I could distinctly smell the sort of acrid scent of paint thinner, though I had no idea what that smell was at the time, only that it was sour, acidic, that kind of scent. I looked all around for my parents, my grandparents, anybody at all. I ran into my grandparents' room where my brother's crib was. No one was there. Couldn't find my parents either. I was alone. When I left my parents' room, there she was, standing in front of my bedroom door, spear pointed in front of her, her dark face twisted into an expression of rage. When she turned toward me, as she ran at full speed down the hall, her spear flew through the air and lodged itself into the wooden door of my parents' bedroom. Terrified, I ducked underneath her legs and ran as fast as I could outside, and though my terror, I just heard her scream something and I woke up. The next morning after my nightmare, I decided I'd tell my dad that I didn't like that painting. Fortunately, he didn't take me seriously. My dad had an odd fascination with the girl in the painting. My mom even admitted later that she didn't like her either, that she had an evil air about her. But no matter how much she tried to convince him to get rid of it, he refused. My dad would make comments like, "She's beautiful, isn't she?" And no matter where we moved, he always took her with him. For years after, he'd call me crazy for not seeing her beauty, or paranoid for thinking a painting was evil. But I held fast to my belief. The last time I saw her was in my parents' attic. She was much smaller than I remembered. Her expression was dark as ever, but her face looked different than before. She now wears a poker face, her eyes unreadable, and her mouth is in a tight, straight line. The evil air about her is diminished, but is still very much there. I turned her painting around so she'd face lying down as I left the attic. The Ghost in the Room. When I was 6 years old, my dad's father passed from cancer. It was one of the first major experiences with death, and to be honest, I don't think I fully grasped what death even meant. But I did understand that my grandpa wouldn't be coming back. I remember going to my grandparents' house with my grandma, my parents, and my aunt and uncle. We went back to stay with my grandma to eat dinner and make sure that she was going to be all right. Now for some background information. My grandma's house was an old-built one in the 1940s. There was a small yellow-tiled kitchen toward the front that led out to the garage park where my grandpa's old Ford truck was parked. To the left of the kitchen was what she referred to as the sitting room, where people did just that. Sit and talk. Straight back from the kitchen was the bathroom and the bedrooms. Her room was on the right side and the two other bedrooms were adjacent to hers. Those were my dad, his brother, and sister's rooms. I sat on one of the rusty orange vinyl chairs with my parents and aunt, listening to them talk. My mom was holding my infant brother who was asleep in her arms, and my aunt was cooing over him. I got so bored of it all that I slid out my chair and slinked off to the bedrooms to find my grandma. I saw her sitting in her room staring blankly at the floor, looking lost. She had suffered the loss of her son a few years before, and now her husband, both to cancer. My grandma was a vibrant, cheery, and vivacious woman. Everyone knew her to be very gregarious and charitable. She was the type of person who'd give the clothes off of her own back if somebody needed them. But those who needed the most help often asked for none of it themselves. I tried to get her attention, not sure of what to do or why she was acting that way. I was only 6 after all. But I don't clearly remember exactly what happened next. All I do remember was that eventually I left the room. I wandered down the hall to my dad and my brother's old room, the same room I had used to sleep when I came over. And what I saw next was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I opened the door to the room and I saw the image of my grandpa, his tall form bowed over and his fingers laced together in prayer. For some strange reason, the apparition was in black and white. I couldn't see the rest of his body. Just his upper body was visible. The rest was hidden in shadow. His image seemed to grow until I could feel it engulf me. I closed my eyes and turned away, but when I turned back, it was gone. Utterly shell-shocked, I ran back to my grandma, who caught me as I fled the room. "What's wrong, baby?" she asked soothingly. I saw, and I couldn't get it out. "What did you see?" she asked. "I saw Granddaddy." She looked behind me but didn't see anything. think she didn't understand what I meant because she'd begun to explain that I couldn't have seen him. But I was adamant. She told me eventually not to tell my dad or aunt because she thought the news would upset them even more. And I never did, until now. For some reason, I forgot this even happening to me until I wrote the last story about my mom's father's spirit possessing her. I think I must have buried it deep down because as soon as it crossed my mind, everything came flooding back. I could even recall the musty smell of my dad's childhood bedroom. The only thing that wasn't clear was how I got to that point. I think I must have hugged my grandma and then left her in her room, or maybe I just left without doing anything. What can I say? I was a child. Now that I remember what happened, I also remember thinking that the apparition looked like a character in an old black and white film, flickering in shades of gray. I remember clearly thinking that he looked like someone had stepped out of an old set in the living room. I think this was also my first real experience with a ghost. Most of the ones I've written so far were told to me by my mom and grandmother, my mom's mother. Eventually, my cousin told me that they had to have the pastor from the church to go check out the house. What I said to my grandma must have really rattled her to her core. She didn't want to live there anymore and eventually moved in with my aunt who lived nearby. She was never the same after that, and never could talk about it to anyone else. So, I will never know. Ghost City. I'm not sure if this is allowed here because it's a place that's seen a lot of paranormal activity rather than a single occurrence. In fact, it is deeply rooted in the ancient religion as a result of its perceived connection with the afterlife. I lived in Chongqing, China, up until about a year or 2 years ago. One of my closest friends was from a town known as Fengdu, which was located in Chongqing province in south-central China. She told me that Fengdu was also known as Ghost City throughout mainland China, because it was believed to be the entrance to the afterlife. She told me that the name Ghost City was ascribed to Fengdu in the Eastern Han Dynasty several thousand years ago when 2 imperial officials came to Ming Mountain, central to Fengdu, to practice Taoist teachings. Their surnames Yin and Wang combined meant King of Hell, and later a temple was erected in their honor, depicting life in the underworld. She told me that it's believed that the dead go to the afterlife through a series of 3 tests. The first test is to cross the quote-unquote nothing to be done bridge, which is a series of 3 stone arches under which square pools of water reside. The virtuous souls will be able to cross without any issue, while the villainous souls will fall into the pools. The second test is to face King Yama, aka the King of Hell in the afterlife, for judgment. At the temple, the passage is known as the Ghost Torturing Pass, and it's decorated with sculptures of ferocious demons and the horribly mutilated bodies of evil souls. The last test is known as the Tianzi Palace. Tianzi means child of heaven. The soul must stand upon a special stone using only 1 foot for 3 minutes. If the soul is righteous and pure, they may enter paradise without issue, but an evil soul will be struck down and sent immediately to hell. At the very end of the 3 passages, there is what's called Last Glance at Home. This is a tower where souls consigned to hell may say farewell to their living family. My friends told me that it can be somewhat gimmicky, but the place actually is believed to be populated by ghosts. Decorated throughout this 2,000-year-old temple are depictions of torture, where people are shown being hung upside down and beaten, black and blue. Coffins are hung from the sides of cliffs as part of an old tradition, and dismembered body parts are pictured in reliefs around the temple walls. Many of the locals also regularly report paranormal activity happening in and around the temple grounds. For example, it's not uncommon for one to see a dead loved one there, and poltergeists happen very often within the temple walls. The entire city really leans into the nickname of Ghost City, and it's most popular to visit during Halloween and King Ming Festival, which is a time where the spirits of loved ones are believed to return to the world of the living to see their families. Not much unlike the Day of the Dead in Mexico. Despite not having visited there myself, my friend told me that the people were visiting for the first time that Fengdu can have a haunted air about it. Giant statues of King Yama and the demons don't help much to alleviate the tension. She also added that the locals love to decorate the area with skeletons doing daily tasks such as cleaning, cooking, playing mahjong, etc., to make it seem more fun. However, one must keep in mind that most, if not all, of these ancient images of torture are depictions of real practices, however gruesome, and the locals firmly believe that the souls of the damned reside there in Fengdu, the entrance to the ancient Chinese hell. Monkeys and black magic. Not quite a ghost story, but I'm pretty sure this counts as something paranormal, and if not, it's still extremely creepy. When I was 17, my mom decided to take our entire family back to her home country in Indonesia to meet her extended family for the first time. Our itinerary would put us in Bali for 2 weeks out of the near 2-month stay at a luxury resort, plus a guided tour of the island. Sounds amazing, right? It was. However, my mom had a very stern warning to give all of us before we embarked on our journey. Some people there practice black magic, and whether you believe it or not, you do not want to end up with a curse on your head. The best ways to avoid it are, do not touch the monkeys that you see, and take care when discarding toiletries. This warning was reiterated by our guide when we arrived as he picked us up from the airport. He told us of what happened to a couple when they did not heed the warnings to not disturb the local fauna in Bali. This story comes from our guide who bore witness to some of these events. There was a young couple in their early mid-20s that came from Australia to Bali as part of their honeymoon. The man was a photographer, and he and his wife wanted to visit the Monkey Temple in Bali. The Monkey Temple was erected by the Hindu people of the region as a way to worship Hanuman, the Hindu monkey god. The monkeys in the surrounding jungle live there and roam freely throughout the temple. I warned them not to bother to visit the monkeys during their visit, he said pointedly. The woman and her husband were enjoying their time at the temple, taking pictures and seeing the dances performed by the worshippers, when the woman encountered a baby monkey. The monkey was alone, playing with a bottle that it had swiped from a tourist. She thought the monkey had been orphaned, so she picked it up and hid it in her coat. When the guide came back around to pick the couple back up, the baby monkey had fallen asleep inside her coat. The guide noticed something wasn't right with the woman, so he asked her about their visit to the temple and continued with pointed questions to try and confirm his suspicions, but stopped when he felt that he might be overstepping. I saw something move in her coat when I dropped them back at their hotel, but I didn't know what it was exactly. Something told me that it was definitely a monkey. The next day, the couple took the monkey with them and rented a car to drive to the mountains. However, they never made it back. They got into a horrible accident, leaving the car in flames. When authorities arrived on the scene, the only thing that could be recovered was the baby monkey, who was completely unharmed. That's the end of tonight's stories. I hope you guys had a good time listening, and I am more interested in this ancient Chinese city than I had been previously, so I want to find more stories like that. But that's just me being selfish. Anything having to do with undead cities is somewhat of an intrigue to me. As always, see you later and see you next time. Unveil the extraordinary with us at Paranormal M. Subscribe and turn on notifications to dive into the depths of the unexplainable. Prepare to be captivated by our latest mind-boggling stories. Enjoy the ride. It's come back for me. Things were quiet. We all started to forget about my mystery woodland encounter we had last year. For the most part, my girlfriend and I had moved on from it. That was until 2 months ago, on a cold February morning, my girlfriend discovered that one of our chicken's legs were snapped in half. I took her to the vet, and they were as confused as I was. There was no sign of any attack, or a clear indication of who or what did this. They recommended that I put her down, but I just couldn't do it. I believed maybe with some rehab in a safe environment she'd heal. I took her home and I put her in the pool house. I went about my days thinking nothing of it. To this day, she hops around on one foot and she is thriving. Anyway, a week goes by and I come out one morning to find another chicken, and both legs are snapped clean in half. I ran over as fast as I could to find a similar situation. There was no sign of an attack or any blood to be found. I took her to the vet, and unfortunately I had to put her down. At this point, I had a chilling feeling as to what might be going on here. And I think it's back. The next day I set up cameras facing those woods. I spent $700 on the best trail cams and the most well-reviewed SD cards I could find, determined to capture it this time. I made a rule that I'd check them every day, twice a day, as to not miss anything at all. Every time I'd find nothing, just some cats and my chickens doing animal stuff. Since we found the first chicken, I haven't been able to sleep. I've had night terrors, nightmares, and sleep paralysis almost every night. I kept having a dream about the woods. Something chasing me, something attacking me, or getting lost in there. I'm constantly on edge, and it seems like every noise makes me jump. Yesterday morning, I went to check the cameras. They're gone. They're fucking gone. Poof. I was baffled and in utter disbelief. I hid these cameras so well, not even my girlfriend could find them, and yet they're gone. I searched everywhere for these things. Every inch of my yard, every nook and cranny of the house and pool house. No trace of them. Angry, confused, and upset, I put on my boots, a thick jacket, and headed into the woods, determined to figure out what this thing was and what it wanted with me. Remember, now those woods are dense and thick. Everything is overgrown and muddy, or so I thought. I pushed my way through the vines and bushes, around trees and stumps, and I stumbled upon something I wish I never found. A clearing. I stopped for a moment to try to understand what I'm looking at. I wish I could share a Google satellite view to prove that this clearing can't possibly exist, but then it dawned on me. Where the hell am I? How long have I been walking? Did I go the wrong way? Oh shit, am I lost? Amongst all my confusion, something catches my eye. It's one of my fucking trail cameras smashed on the ground. How the hell did this end up here? It was at this time I realized that it was absolutely silent all around me. I mean, I could hear my own heart beating. Reality set in, and I had the immediate urge to run as fast as I could in the opposite direction. This is where I'm at a complete loss. I took what I thought was maybe 100 steps through some dense vines and brush, and there I was, at the back of my property. It felt like it took a minute or two of scrambling through the thick overgrowth, and I was back. Still, absolutely panicking, I continued onward until I reached the back door. I bolted the door and locked myself in the bedroom. I haven't said a word to anyone today. I called out of work, and it's been about 18 hours, and all I can think about is going back in. I'm scared I can't sleep. I know it's watching me through my bedroom window. Mr. Charlie, or what was the light at the end of the bed? Myself, a male, 30, my fiancée, a female, 29, and our child, female, 21 months, all live in a suite attached to a larger house. The main house was built in 1941, and the suite was built roughly 20 years ago. The daughter of the original owner sold the main house to her son, who built her the smaller suite because she didn't need a giant, square foot house. She passed away roughly 15 years ago, and the son sold the property and moved to the beach. I'm renting from the current owners as we don't need all the square footage of the main house. We're only residing in that suite. The main house is empty. Aside from the normal creaks and groans of an 80-year-old house, there's nothing particularly interesting or strange about the main building. We've lived in the suite for about a year with no issues, and the main house has been empty this whole time. Everything was normal until 3 or 4 days ago. My daughter's recently been having what we guessed were night terrors, waking up screaming and inconsolable at random hours of the night. I am a very heavy sleeper, so until she starts wailing, I don't notice. And it's usually mom that takes control of the baby duties, which usually ends up with the baby in bed with us. The other night, apparently, she was sitting up and having a conversation, quote unquote. She has a good vocabulary for her age, but like many kids, she just kind of strings a sentence together and it comes out as a bunch of gibberish. Funny during the day, disconcerting at night. Anyway, she sits up in the bed and she seems to be speaking towards the closet. Her conversation, if you could call it that, was complete with pauses, as though she was listening and nodding as though she were listening and understanding. She ended this all by saying clearly, "Night-night, Uncle Charlie." Now, night-night is a phrase that she uses quite often. Uncle is not a word that she knows. She doesn't have an uncle, and neither myself nor my fiancé knows anybody named Charlie. This story was relayed to me the next morning. We were more puzzled than anything. We are both skeptical but mildly open-minded. Trying to figure out who Charlie could be, my fiancé says that the only Charlie she knows is her Uncle Charlie, who died when she was a baby, and who I had never even heard about. Doesn't seem likely that my daughter would be talking about him. A strange idea occurred to me. The former resident of the house, the grandson of the original owner, goes by Chuck. I did some research and got a kind of uneasy feeling when I discovered his father's name was Charles. His father, who passed away in 1989. Death certificate said DOA at hospital, dead on arrival, for those who don't know that. So in theory, I guess he could have died in the house. I'm still hesitant to put these things together, but I do think it's awfully coincidental that my child is talking to Uncle Charlie, and the deceased for mere residence just happens to be named Charles. Then last night happened. The kid has been very hard to put to bed lately. She used to love going to sleep, but recently she's been fighting every step of the way. The only thing that's helped is one of us sitting by her bed and staying there until she's asleep. Not strange, I guess. Kids are weird. Last night, it was determined that I should perform this ritual. Once she was asleep, and it did take a while, my wife told me that something strange had happened, and she had recorded some video from the baby monitor. What she showed me has got me a little bit freaked out. I was in the room with no lights on. There are absolutely no light sources other than a carbon monoxide detector, which blinks with barely visible light once maybe every 30 seconds, if not longer. The baby monitor, of course, uses night vision so you can see things, but they're all washed out with no color. The kid's blanket is bunched up at the bottom of the crib, away from her and myself, in the corner of the camera view. In that same corner as I'm trying to get her to sleep is a flashing light. It happens several times in less than a 30-second clip, and it doesn't seem especially regular. It just looks like an innocuous circle of light. Except there's no obvious source. We watched the baby monitor immediately after, and there's no light. We watched it this morning. No light. The crib hasn't moved. We haven't changed anything in the room. Everything is the same as it has been for a year. Except for this weird little light on the side of the crib closest to the closet. Anyway, I apologize for the long post. We're just at a loss. She's convinced that it's Charles. I'm staying nervously skeptical for the time being. Woman in black hood. So I've been haunted before by a little girl in a white nightie, who, when she would visit me in the night, she was as clear as day, and I would wake up in bruises with black eyes. My ex also saw her standing over us in the bed one night. I'd never told her about the girl because I knew that she wouldn't come around, and she described her exactly. Skip forward a decade, and I've been fine since getting rid of the attached object. I woke up tonight, however, to see a figure in my room about a quarter of the way across my room. A young woman in a very light blue sundress and a black hooded cape. The hood was up, covering the upper half of her face, and she was staring right at me. Shrouded in shadow, I flinch because the active mind of a sleeper has played tricks on me before, and I move to a different position. I try to just allow my eyes to realize that it's just the darkness playing tricks on them. The figure didn't disappear. They took a visible step back and continued to watch me instead, only disappearing when I finally got the lamp on next to me. They could have come closer in that time, but didn't. It seemed as though they were caught off guard by me waking up. There were no clothes hung on the door, or anything there to take that shape. And having been visited before, I know that feeling. My toilet's in that direction, and as I reluctantly walked through the spot she was in, my whole body shivered, and my hairs stood up on end. I think she was still there, and I walked through her. But where's Gabriel? This took place in the early 2000s, during the beginning of my second grade, going into my third grade year of schooling. We had just moved to a small town in California, and I was having a hard time transitioning and making friends at this new school. The local kids essentially segregated me from the student body, and quite frankly was fine with it at this point. A couple of weeks had passed and I was tired of playing alone, so I walked over to this kid who I'd noticed playing in the sandbox and swing set. I genuinely expected him to brush me off, but to my surprise, he was extremely friendly. He had this strange obsession with playing with these green-looking bees that would tunnel in the sand. At first I was afraid, but he assured me that they were friendly, and that we could essentially make little tunnels and mazes in the sand so they could have adventures. Months passed, and people started giving me weird looks. I paid no mind at all. All I could think about was going to recess and play with my new friend. Recess came, and I finally decided to ask him for his name. He looked around and in a hushed tone whispered to me, "My name is Gabriel, but please don't tell anyone that we hang out." This completely caught me off guard in a way that kind of hurt my feelings. After that day, I didn't see him again for a while. My second grade year came to an end, and third grade began. Once again, I found myself having a hard time with this new group of kids. It got to the point where I was done trying to make friends. Recess couldn't come fast enough. I walk out of class and boom, I see Gabriel in the sandbox, so I ran up to him. He didn't look surprised at all. He just waved me over and we started playing again. Weeks go by, and we're in the middle of playing with the bees as usual, when we noticed an office aide making their way towards us. Gabriel looked panicked and told me, "Act like I don't exist." Once again, catching me off guard. I get brought to the office for a meeting involving my principal, my mother, and both my second and third grade teacher. I was concerned until my mother asked me, "Who are you talking to during recess?" The question confused me, but I answered anyway. I told her I was playing with my friend Gabriel. She had a concerned look on her face and looked back at my principal, who looked pale for some strange reason. My principal asked me the same question, to which I replied with the same answer. Now both teachers and the principal look worried. They asked me to not go back to the sandbox anymore, and that I couldn't play with Gabriel anymore either. This struck me to my core. This was my only friend in the last year and a half, and now I can't play with him? Why? Well, I listened, and a few years later I decided to ask my mom about that conference that we had. She was shocked that I remembered it at all, so she explained everything. Apparently, almost 10 years prior, a little boy named Gabriel had passed away after getting stung by a bee in the sandbox. He was actually severely allergic to bees. The teachers knew I had a hard time making friends, so I guess they'd watch me during recess and noticed I'd be talking to myself during recess. It got to the point that they were concerned enough to finally figure out what I was doing. Long story short, I was playing with a kid who had passed away. This bothered the principal so much they renovated the sandbox and I never saw him again. Normally I'd be spooked by something of this nature, but in this case I only find myself grateful for him and the memories. Shout out to my spooky friend Gabriel for reaching his hand out when I felt so alone. Rest in peace, Gabriel. My ex's house was demonic, or whatever was in it was. Several years ago, I was in my early 20s and ended up in a relationship that shouldn't have ever happened. It was a mess from the start, but that's a story for a different sub. What made it worse was the creepy house that we lived in. The house itself was beautiful. It was a large older house with a beautiful staircase, 3 bathrooms, and 5 bedrooms. It had basically been gutted and rebuilt. I often wonder if that particular rebuilding had a hand in all of this weird phenomenon. While it looked beautiful, it didn't feel homey. It felt lonely and empty. Initially, I chalked this up to its size and need for more homey decor. Of course, there was the cliché feeling of being watched, which I'm no stranger to, especially at nighttime when we would be watching TV with most of the lights off. A long hallway branched off from the living room, and it sort of felt like somebody was glaring at us from the dark corridor. All stuff that I'd say you can shake off. My first real, oh crap, moment was one evening after I got off work. He texted me to let me know that he'd be working a bit later and to go ahead to the house and let myself in just to freshen up. This house had an amazing bathroom with a jacuzzi tub on the lower level, so I jumped at the chance to get in and relax. After filling the tub up with nearly melt your skin off hot water, I laid back with my eyes closed. This euphoric moment was interrupted when I heard the front door down the hall slam. I could hear what sounded like heavy boots shuffling around before they started stomping down the hallway. I heard every aggressive step until they stopped right outside the bathroom door. I knew he was home and must be in a bad mood and was ready for what could be, a crappy evening. Several seconds passed, but he never entered or said anything. I also never heard him walk away. After a good minute or two, I called out his name with no response. I had talked to him about my feelings about the house, and he had admitted that he felt the same, and had had some freaky experiences since living there. I then realized he was trying to mess with me and would probably bust through the door and scare me at any minute. I called back out to him, letting him know not to bother, that it wouldn't work. Was met with eerie silence. I decided the whole relaxation thing was over and got out to confront him. I opened the bathroom door to absolutely no one there. I admit, I was shaking as I looked down the hallway to see if he was trying to hide, but again saw no one. As I went back into the bathroom to get my phone to call him, I heard the front door open again and I could hear him setting stuff down. I come down the hall and he greeted me. He seemed to be in a good mood. He made a joke about knowing I'd be in the bath when he noticed my robe. I was practically speechless. He asked what was wrong and I explained what had happened. He waved it off, saying that he heard that stuff all the time. "You get used to it," he said simply. He was right. I heard this quite frequently, both when I was alone in the house, and we would both hear it together at times. At a different point, we were sitting on the couch discussing what to get, and it was bright and sunny outside. We were discussing maybe going hiking, when all of a sudden the front door burst open with such force the door made contact with the wall behind it and bounced off of it. We both were stunned for several moments until I spoke up and said the wind must be bad outside. He remarked about how there was literally no wind outside. We walked out onto the porch to a very still and pleasant day. Another evening, it was just getting dark out, and I was watching TV alone while he was in another room working on something. I never put much thought into orbs or took the whole orb thing seriously, to be honest, until that night. As I'm watching TV, I see what looks like a small circular ball of light come down from the staircase, from the corner of my eye. I turned to look at it head on, and it floated below the TV and up the massive shelf to the right of the TV. I watched it float all the way up to the top shelf, until reaching the ceiling and vanishing. I was covered in goosebumps, and I felt terrified. I knew there was nothing that could have caused that. All the windows were sealed off with the blinds closed as well as the heavy drapes. I also didn't hear a single vehicle pass by at that time. The TV was also on low volume. I ended up calling for him to come to the living room. Again, I sputtered off like a terrified idiot. He seemed to actually be a bit freaked out. And he said that it didn't surprise him. Whatever it was, it liked being noticed. I'll leave off with one experience that I still get instantly weirded out when I think about it till this day. We had both fallen asleep while watching TV one night. I remember it was in the middle of winter, and it was cold in the house, as keeping the large house heated in low temperatures was both hard and expensive. I was on one end of the couch, and he was on the other. I woke up with a start, and I felt very disoriented. I then reached for my phone to see what time it was, only to feel even more panicked when I saw it was nearly 5 a.m. I had to work that morning in less than a couple of hours, and I did not bring my work clothes with me, as I didn't plan on spending the night. I threw the blanket off of me to get up and grab my shoes and keys when I noticed my ex was wide awake, sitting up on the other side of the couch looking at me. I was taken aback as he had such a strange look on his face. I asked him what was wrong and why he didn't wake me up sooner, as he knew my work situation. He just shook his head and slowly looked away. Odd, but I didn't have time to really get into it with him. I just needed to hurry and make the 30-minute drive home to get ready for work. As I got my shoes on and got my keys, he asked me to please not go yet until he was ready. I went to ask him what he was getting ready for, as I knew he was off that day. But he was gone down the hall to the bedroom before I could ask. He came back a couple of minutes later, fully dressed, and was putting his coat on. I then asked where in the world he was going. He told me he was going to his mother's house, which was just a few houses down from his own. I looked at him like he was crazy and told him it's 5 a.m, surely your mom is asleep. He told me it didn't matter. He had a key and would rest on the couch until she got up. Again, I was weirded out, but also pressed for time and mentally noted to ask him about this later. We walked outside, said goodbye, and he headed straight to his mom's. Later in the day, I had texted him to ask him about it, but he said he'd rather explain in person. After I get off work, I head to his house, and wasted no time asking what had gotten him into this. He seemed reluctant to talk about it, but did start to tell the story. He said he had woke up a little bit before me, and when he woke up, he too was disoriented at first, but quickly realized what had woke him up. He said it felt like someone was hitting him in the back of the couch. As he started to wake up more and realized that that wasn't possible, he suddenly locked his eyes on me. I was still sound asleep when he said it was like something took over him. He felt himself start growling. His teeth were clenched together so tight that his jaw ached, but he couldn't control it. He said he could feel that he was showing his teeth as he growls, and they got deeper and louder. He explained that the growls were so animalistic that he couldn't imitate it. The whole time he couldn't look away from me, while he felt this strong feeling of anger come over him. He also said another part of him was wondering how I wasn't waking up as he was growling so loud that his own ears were ringing. In reality, he said it was probably only 15 or 20 seconds, but to him it felt like much longer. Just as suddenly as it had started, he snapped out of it. As the growling stopped, he was able to relax his jaw and look away from me. He said he sat there for several minutes while I never once even moved. He said he couldn't decide whether he should wake me up or not. He was so confused. When I did wake up and went to leave, he was so shaken by the whole experience that he was scared to be alone in the house, hence him asking me to stay so we could get ready and go to his mom's until daybreak at least. Other things happened, but that last one always got me. Did whatever that thing was, want to hurt me? Want him to hurt me? I was honestly relieved knowing I'd never have to go back there once we split for good. He's moved since, and I wonder what the new inhabitants have experienced. My old job as a CNA. So many years ago, I became a CNA, which is a certified nursing assistant. It was a simple job. Basically, we're taking care of adults all day. Now, I've had my fair share of scary stuff. Wiping butts, cleaning poo off the floor. But those came with the job, and quite frankly, you become numb to it after a while. But that's not what I want to share. I wanted to tell my experiences when a patient is close to death. Scary things tend to happen in the days leading up to it. Let's start with my first experience. I won't name names due to the laws and regulations. We will start with Jay. We're going to call them that. And I'm, as the narrator, because I hate reading letters, I'm going to name her Janice. Now, Janice was a retired Marine. Oops, I'm going to now switch genders to Jerry. Jerry was a retired Marine who saw combat in Vietnam and a retired sheriff. Jerry was one bad dude. Years of smoking created a hole in his throat, so it was hard for him to talk. Although you could understand some things. Now, the first thing to change when close to death is the smell coming from one person's body. It's hard to explain, but it just smells like rotting meat. When I noticed the smell on Jerry, I sat with Jerry and talked about life in general. I'm trying not to talk about death, but steering it that way. We finally got onto the topic, and Jerry's just whole attitude flip-flopped. He put up a hand, signaling me to stop talking. He took a deep breath and mustered up some words. Last night, man was in room. My heart sank. Tall and dark, wearing top hat. I could visibly see the fear in Jerry's eyes. Combat and being a sheriff in the 80s couldn't have prepared him for what he saw that night. I had a blank stare. I didn't know what to tell him. He was visibly stressed. He shrugged his shoulders at me and continued watching his show. Maybe an hour or so passed. Jerry was in the living room, and I was in the kitchen. The TV volume was up a bit due to Jerry's hearing. We both sort of jumped when we heard a loud bang in his room across the way. It wasn't a normal sound. It sounded like someone chucked a piece of steak at the floor. It was such a distinctive sound. Even with Jerry's hearing, he heard it. He looked over to me with an eyebrow raised. I assumed it was someone in the house. I looked at Jerry and told him to stay put. I needed to check the house. Now I slowly rounded the corner to the hall. I looked towards his door and saw a shadow from underneath. I slowly crept up to the door and yelled, "Get out of this house now or I'm calling the police." I opened the door quickly. There was nothing. Everything was untouched and in its place. Windows and curtains were left as is. I searched the whole room. There was no one. I went back to Jerry and explained what had happened. He gave me a look and said, "Dark man." I was frozen, scared to turn around. Yet I quickly turned to see nothing behind me, but Jerry was fixed on the corner of the hall. He could see something that I couldn't. Now, Jerry, being the badass he was, flipped off the air and turned back to his show. I'm freaking out now. I proceeded to search the whole house, every door and every nook, under beds and closets. Nothing was empty. Now my shift of 12 hours was about to end. The other nurse finally arrived. I let them in and explained what's going on. They are too creeped out. Since they have the overnight shift, I left with a lot of questions and hella spooked. Fast forward to the next day, though. I get a call saying that Jerry passed away during the night. That they found him on the floor beside his bed. The overnight nurse heard a loud thump in the middle of the night and rushed into the room and found Jerry on the floor, not breathing, no pulse. Since he had a DNR, there was nothing we could do. Days later, it was determined that he had a heart attack and tried to leave bed. He had rolled to the edge of the bed and his body rolled off the side, hitting the floor, making a sound like meat hitting a solid floor. The same sound heard the very day before by me and Jerry. Experience 2. I once did live in an in-care for this man, Frank. I'm going to call him Frank. Frank was an older gentleman. He lived in a 110-year-old Victorian home. He was a lifelong mechanic and really smart. He was diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's, a mix that would cause a lot of confusion and combative incidents. Besides this, he was as sharp as can be. This one particular night, Frank seemed on edge. I asked what was going on. He explained that he's recently been hearing things, that it was hard for him to sleep. I sort of shrugged it off and helped him into bed. I walked to my room and snuggled into bed ready to sleep. A few minutes passed by and I heard a yell coming from Frank's room. I jumped up and ran over. Frank is in the corner of his bed, fully fetal, scared out of his mind. I flicked the light on and asked what's going on. Frank explained that there was a demon sitting on his desk in the corner watching him. He explained its skin was black like burnt and char, its eyes sunken in with black voids. He said that it smiled at him. Now, as a medical professional, it's imperative that we keep a professional standpoint, but that night shook me to my core. I talked about God with him and prayed with him. All the time, Frank is glancing around me at the desk over and over. He had a look of despair on his face. We finished talking and I head toward the door, and Frank, the manliest man I know, asked the weirdest question with reasonable cause. He said, "Will you sleep on my bed with me?" I sort of chuckled and asked, "Why would I?" Then he cuts me off, and with pure fear in his eyes, he says, "Because it has never left. It's still there. While you were praying, it was mimicking what you were saying in a low demonic tone." Now I'm completely spooked. Nothing could have prepared me for that response. I tried my best to keep a straight face. Remember, professionalism, so I responded, "Of course, but I will sleep on the recliner in the corner." Needless to say, I didn't sleep that whole night. A few weeks passed and it was morning. I was helping Frank out of bed. He turned quickly and was fixed on an old oak stair out the door. He was very distracted. He didn't speak the whole time. And when we walked downstairs, he was fixed on the top the whole time. We sat down for breakfast. He dropped his fork on the plate and sat back, looked me in the eyes. He pointed to the doorway in the kitchen. "Are those your nieces or something?" I was taken back. "What?" I asked, confused. "Those kids there, are they with you?" Now I began to feel a cold wind down my back, and chills formed from my head to toe. "Frank, there are no children there." Child's laugh came from the staircase. I jump up. Frank turns toward the corner of the room and asks the wall, "How long have you been dead?" I screamed out, "Frank, what the fuck are you talking about?" "The children there, their clothes, they look old, and their faces are sunken in. They look like they've been decaying for a long time." By now, I jumped up and explained that I needed a moment. I walked out of the kitchen more scared than ever. I collected myself and returned. Frank was there, unfazed, eating his eggs. Most of my experiences have been somewhat scary, even terrifying. But definitely what tops the books is death itself. There are so many unknowns. Many people fear death because the afterlife is an unexplained thing. We only have testimonies from people who passed for a certain number of minutes. I'm fortunate enough to never brush off death, but I witnessed it firsthand a number of times. Here's one of those stories with the ending hours of Frank's life. Months have passed since the whole kitchen incident. Not much scary has happened besides the occasional noise in the house or footsteps on the oak staircase. Most of the house was original wood floors. Remember, this house was about 110 years old, so anomalies weren't too worrisome. I can only imagine the number of things that happened in that old house. In those months, Frank has had a steady decline in health. It's got to the point that he no longer talks or eats. Hospice is involved, and for those who don't know, it's an organization that helps with those close to death. The hospice's goal is to provide comfort. So, Frank most of the time was given regular doses of morphine to make his pending passing more comfortable. I walked into Frank's room to take some routine vitals. I held his wrist with a pointer and middle finger looking for a pulse. Strange, I said to myself. His pulse was barely there. Med personnel call it a thread pulse. And it was slow. I began counting his breathing. I'm in my head watching his chest rise, then fall. 1, I would say to myself. I don't remember the exact count, but I remember panicking. It was way too low for oxygen intake. Now, like most elderly people, DNRs are in effect, so I couldn't do much. I knew he would pass within a few hours, so in order to make his passing more comfortable, I pulled up a chair. I began reading a book to him. The last thing to deteriorate is hearing. Even when comatose, people can still kind of hear what's around them. I was about halfway through the book. For sake of information, Frank has been comatose and in a fluid state due to the morphine, and he doesn't respond or move. Now I was about to have the biggest jump scare of my life. Frank's eyes shot open and began scanning the room at a fast pace. He reached out and grabbed my arm. My heart hit my throat. His breathing intensified. It was quick and shallow. I began trying to pull away. I grabbed Frank's hand, his eyes fixed on me. I was looking right into his eyes. He had this 1,000-yard stare, blank, no expression. He didn't say anything. I was petrified. I didn't move. I just stared into Frank's eyes. His breathing slowed. A tear began to fall from his eye. I mustered up the courage and I said, "It's okay, Frank, it's time to go. Don't be afraid, I'm here with you, you're not alone." And with that, he took a deep breath, and I watched life leave his eyes. It's hard to explain the experience or how you can literally see life leave someone's eyes. I'll do my best to explain. His grip loosened on my arm. His hand turned ice cold. His hand fell to the side. Watching his last breath wasn't a fearful one, more like a relief. like it was finally over. I watched fearful eyes turn to blank, dilated pupils. His head fell towards his pillow, eyes still locked on mine. Even after passing, his eyes stayed open. I reached for his wrist. It's still warm but cold. I searched for a pulse, nothing. I reached for his neck, no pulse. Watch his chest, no rise or fall. I checked my watch. 16:28, time of death. I write it down and I called hospice. They sent out an RN right away. They confirmed death. We call Frank's friend and only known trustee. She's in another state hours away. She asked that we locked up and unplugged appliances. Now the whole ordeal was traumatizing, yet it continued. The coroner arrived hours later. They rolled the gurney in, unzipped their body bag. The smell alone coming from them, like death and cheap cleaner. It's a smell I'll never forget. They walked into Frank's room, wrapped him in his bed sheets. They lift him onto the gurney, wiped down his hospital bed. They had the RN and me fill out a form, gave us a card, and just like that, Frank's body was taken away. Now, Frank was single. He had no children and no family. It was the end of a family line. The RN said her goodbyes and walked out. I was left alone in this giant, empty, quiet house. I began locking up the doors and windows, turning off lights and unplugging appliances. I walk into Frank's room and the smell is just lingering of the coroner. I sit on the chair, still scooted up to his bedside, and sat there for what felt like hours. I'm just thinking about everything that happened. It was hard. Truth be told, I became depressed for quite a while after, questioning everything I knew about life. Watching someone's life slip away while staring them directly in the face messes you up. Ouija boards are bullshit. Right? Right? I was about 18, and I was hanging out at my friend Joanne's house with some other school friends. Can't quite remember how we got onto the subject, but towards the end of the evening, Joanne thought it would be fun to perform a seance. Joanne and her family were from Cape Town, South Africa, and had deep-rooted interest in the spiritual. Or at least, that's what Joan made out to us. With the lights off and candles lit, we all sat around a round table, with cards fanned out around the edge. Each card had a letter of the alphabet, arranged A to Z, and a shot glass placed in the middle. Joanne starts speaking out to the spirits in Afrikaans. I remember pulling a face and rolling my eyes. It was too dark for anybody to take offense. At the time, I was an insufferable, enlightened, atheist teen dork. You know the type, cringy 4chan edgelord who thinks any form of spirituality or religion is beneath me and my superior intellect. I never wore a fedora, but I was damn close. However, what was about to happen made me question everything. It started mundane enough. A few questions were asked, and the shot glass that was resting on her fingers started to move to and fro, until eventually one of my friends asked the spirit if they were associated with anyone in the room. The shot glass moved directly toward me. Incredulous, I asked the spirit if you're associated with me and what my mother's maiden name was. My eyes fixate on the letters that spell out her maiden name, Jones. But the glass just started spelling out something different. First, the glass went to T, then H, then O. I thought then that it was bullshit, as it was completely wrong. Then I was struck by a horrific realization. When my mom was 6 months old, her biological father died of a heart attack, and a year after, she took her stepfather's name. I completely forgot this, and in that moment, as I was expecting the shot glass to read out the maiden name that she had for the majority of her life, but it was actually spelling out her original maiden name, Thompson. It was a fact so trivial that I barely remembered it myself. It was something never talked about, even within my family, as it happened so long ago. It would be hard to believe that any of my friends would know this esoteric piece of my family's history that occurred 20 years before I was even born. But nonetheless, somehow, it being spelled out in front of my own very eyes. Thompson. My school friends and I wouldn't talk about anything deeper than video games and tits at that age, yet there's no way I ever mentioned this to any of them. It's not like one of my pot-smoking loser friends had a copy of my mom's birth certificate, and none of them had ever even met anyone else in my family. There was literally no way anybody could have known this. Before I could contemplate this for too long or ask any other questions to my ghostly associate, Joanne's mom came into the room and turns the lights on, and with a thick South African accent shouts something like, "Bloody hell, Joanne, stop messing around with this silly crap," and put a definitive stop to the proceedings. Ask Reddit. In my senior year of high school, I was stuck in writing class with all grades for a semester. I was sat next to a group of rather loud freshmen, much to my dismay, and despite trying to remain as recluse as possible, one of the freshman girls would occasionally try and chat with me. Because of my grumpy nature, she began calling me Grandpa, rather affectionately. And only she in the group would bother to talk to me. We definitely weren't friends. She was just too loud and bubbly for me. But even as the semester ended and we changed classes, we passed each other every morning on our way to first period, and she would always call out, "Hey, Grandpa," as she passed me with her group of friends. In late March, it begun to buzz around the school that a freshman had committed suicide. It was sad to the upperclassmen, but we never dwelled on it, because beyond hearing about the suicide prevention the assembly freshmen were required to attend, it never affected us. In mid-April, I was running late to my first period, and this particular day stuck out to me, because I'd actually done my first period homework, which I never did. And if you showed up late, any work turned out wasn't credited. As I was running down the hall, I saw the freshman girl alone and leaning up against the wall. She looked at me and said, "Hey, Grandpa," in a very sad voice. I quickly said hi and ran off to class without another thought. Fast forward to my last band concert of the year, and the final song was sung by the choir in dedication for the fallen freshmen who had been in the group. I glanced down at the program to see what song they were singing, and for the first time ever I saw the freshman's name. It was the freshman girl. I was immediately frozen stiff, much to my bandmates' confusion, and asked if it was a misprint. Nope, it was her name. I looked her up and the death date in the obituary, and it was March. But I'd seen her in April, alone, and so sad-looking. I cried on my walk home after the concert, and still to this day, I have homework that I was never credited in April because I ran late. If anybody else other than the narrator remembers this, I apologize for my editor having posted a repeat story. But as the reader, I'm pretty sure I've heard this story before, so nope, you're not crazy. Something is always following and touching me. Recently, I have felt something following me around everywhere. I always feel like someone is watching me, and I feel a hand on my shoulder or head when nothing's there. So I keep seeing this thing when I'm outside. It doesn't talk usually, but I keep seeing it wherever I go. It's always behind a tree or hiding. When I was younger, I used to go outside to swing next to a huge tree, and I kept seeing a shadow figure stick its head out. But whenever I actually looked at it, it disappeared. It didn't hurt or scare me. It's sort of like a father. It comforts me, and yes, it may be just an imaginary friend, but it feels real. I keep feeling it touch me on my shoulder, and I feel it next to me, always beside or behind me. When I sleep and face the wall, I feel it behind me. There are times when I see it or hear it in the closet or in the hallway at night, but it doesn't harm me. When I say it doesn't harm me and it says it brings no threats, it's comforting to me, and I talk to it sometimes, and during school I write about it and I draw it. I might be crazy, but it looks so real and feels real too. It's super tall, no face, no accessories, nothing on it. A shadow figure, really skinny. I can almost see its bones. It has a low, sort of raspy voice. It's nice and kind. It's never made me feel threatened or scared. I feel happy and relaxed and welcomed by it. I never can touch it though, but it can touch me. If I try to touch it, it fades away. It's not around me all the time, but he comes to me when I feel stressed or scared. No one else seems to see him, but I know I see it. Also, I don't just see him behind trees. Sometimes when I swing, I see him next to the road, and once I saw him next to the road somewhere else, but it was signaling me to follow it. The Weeping Cabinet. Back again in my childhood home, where we last left off, with the kitchen walker. This time around, the topic is the weeping cabinet in the dining room. By the time my mom divorced my dad, we had long since turned the dining room into anything but. It was my brother's room, my dad's room, a playroom, and a man cave. The dining room is directly connected to the kitchen, where the kitchen walker's domain is. In said dining room were these 2 glass china cabinets that we had put my dad's old Coca-Cola memorabilia and action figure collection in. When my mom moved out, my dad took over her old room, known as Alcatraz, because it felt separated from the house and the boiler and heating system rattled like you wouldn't believe. And we turned the dining room into a man cave. We had a TV and a futon set up in the middle of the room, with the cabinets to the left of the TV. Flash forward a year, and my dad's packing and moving out across town. I'm spending the night at Dad's, and I'm in the man cave. I got my back to the cabinets, and it's around 1 o'clock in the morning. I suddenly get a feeling like my heart is exploding and my eyes start uncontrollably tearing up. I know for a fact I'm being watched by something standing in front of the cabinets. Just off to the left of my periphery, there is this faceless entity with black just dripping from its chin, like tears streaming down its face. This entity, which has shown up for the first time, just stands there and watches me while I uncontrollably sob for half an hour. You could feel its emotions and tell it was sad, not mad. That made it all the harder to bear. You see, those same cabinets for years would rattle to me and would move the action figures, clink the Coke bottles together, and I'd even hear it sing. My dad had an old Coca-Cola speaker without batteries, but I still remember hearing occasional nursery rhymes. London Bridge, Ring Around the Rosie, and This Little Light of Mine, to name a few. I will go to my grave with the firm belief that the poor ghost wept for our departure. I never got to know it like I did Bethany the hall ghost, or the kitchen walker, but I will miss it dearly, and I hope if someone takes up residence in that house that they too will be friendly to specters. The ghosts in that house are truly kind and just want to hang out. Hazmat man in Pennsylvania. I was doing a delivery for work about an hour ago from typing this. The delivery was in Grove City, Pennsylvania, and the unloading area was right off of one of the roads in this particular part of town. As the guy started unloading my truck with his forklift, a couple other guys came out just to chat. The guy on the forklift points to the road and asks if he sees what he's seeing. After I told him no and looked at the road, I saw it. There was a tall, broad man wearing a fluorescent yellow jumpsuit that resembled a hazmat suit. It was the same shade of yellow as the stereotypical selection of rain jackets or rain boots. Keep in mind that it's hot and sunny outside today. He was wearing black boots, bulky black gloves that looked like the ones you'd wear in snowy weather, and one of those N95 type masks. All of his skin was covered except for his eyes. This alone was very strange, but his behavior was also very off. He was walking in a very exaggerated manner. It almost looked like he was dance walking. He stopped when a kid about 10 years old happened to ride by him on his bike. He stopped the kid and started talking to him. One of the guys helping unload my truck loudly told us to check if he knows that kid. After that, the man and the boy go in opposite directions. The man then stops, looks at me, and waves. It was hard to tell, but it looked like his eyes were squinted as if he was smiling, a really big smile under his mask. I didn't wave back and just kept watching him. He walked by the guard shack in front of the unloading zone, which blocked my view of him, and then he was gone with no trace. The road was open with no surrounding woods or intersecting roads nearby. It would have been extremely obvious if he came out from around that shack. I walked around to find him and even looked again as I was driving away, but it was like he was never there. What could this have been? Was it some creep or criminal? Was this something paranormal like the Grinning Man, an extraterrestrial, or maybe interdimensional being? It wasn't just mind tricks because at least 5 people in total saw the same thing. Demons attacked my house. I was around 9 or 10 when this happened. I was living in a 1-story, 3-bedroom house with my mom and 3 younger siblings. It was the middle of the winter, maybe late November. While our house was small, the yard and backyard were combined around a football field of land, with a hill and railroad tracks in the backyard. It was noon, and my mom was making lunch, and since I couldn't find anything, I asked her for something to watch. She heard about a documentary on a really haunted house in our hometown of Indiana. In Indiana. I believe the documentary was called The Demon House. Could be wrong, though. I found it and I started watching it. I know it's not something someone my age should have been watching, but anyway, during the entire documentary, the narrator kept saying, "The truth is this video is haunted." Me and my mom thought it was bullshit, and we finished the documentary thinking that it was all right. That night was the worst night I have ever lived through. During the night, I heard banging on my sister's window. Our windows were right next to each other. I told my mom about it, but she thought it was just shrubbery, because there was a tree right next to the window. I went back to my bed, and then it moved to the other side of the house. Went from the back of the house to the left of the house from the front. At this point, it was by the kitchen. At this point, my mom calls the police to see what's going on, but they arrived and the screen door bangs on the frame that it was supposed to be on. When the cops got there, they said that it was probably just the screen door. After telling them the banging was in the back too, they walked around there and looked around. But what they told us shook me to my core. There were no footprints. It was snowing. I don't remember what happened from there, but when I woke up, that next morning there was banging on the window right next to my head. I jumped up and opened the blinds of my window. There wasn't a thing. My aunt dabbles with stuff like this, so after telling her about it, she came the same day and used incense to ward off bad spirits. After that, there was nothing else that ever came of it, really. My Ouija board experience. Buckle up. When I was in 4th or 5th grade, my best friend was given a Ouija board for her birthday. We loved that thing. For months we would sit with it after school, talking with what we thought were our deceased relatives. I now know that was a lie. You can only communicate with the demonic through this medium, or at least that's what I believe. Eventually, a quote-unquote spirit wouldn't leave her board. His name was Steve, which is kind of ironic because that's also our creepy neighbor's name. Anyways, Steve wouldn't leave the board. Even when we'd ask to speak with our grandparents and other relatives, our relationship with Steve became more and more violent the longer we communicated with him. He would threaten our pets and even our own lives. We kind of thought it was exciting until one day he took it too far. This day, we brought a third friend to play with us. We were sitting in a circle like normal with our ankles crossed near the board. After playing for a bit and realizing it was Steve, we decided to say goodbye. Only this time, we didn't finish the goodbye because when we looked down, all 3 of us had scratches on our ankles. We snatched our hands away and stood up very quickly, thus ending the conversation. Without saying goodbye, big mistake. We decided then that we needed to get rid of that board, so we brought it on a little walk with us to the neighborhood pond. I held the triangle piece, my best friend held the board, and the third friend had the box. We threw each of them in different locations in the same pond and walked away feeling like $1,000,000. Chanting, "Screw Steve," and everything else. It was only later that night that we realized we had royally messed up. At 3 a.m. exactly, I woke up. The energy in my room was off. It was darker than usual. The shadows were blacker than usual. And then they started moving. It was like an entire demonic portal opened up in my room, and the energy went haywire. That first night was the worst. I felt so alone, I was so scared. I buried my face underneath the covers and somehow fell back asleep. The next day I told my friends about it, and they couldn't believe it either. The exact same thing happened to them at the exact same time. We realized pretty quickly what that meant. We were haunted by the board, and we were for the next 3 months or so that we would wake up to the slightest every single time, every single night. We would wake up to that sight. We even had a group chat going and would pretty much all communicated at 3 a.m. It was terrifying, and we really thought it was never going to end. The third friend grew to resent us for a little while because she had only played with us that horrible day, poor girl. Anyways, the story does have a happy ending, sort of. The haunting came to an end one day after a heavy rainstorm. Somehow, the board washed up in my friend's backyard, completely put back together in the same box with hardly any water damage. My friend kept it underneath the stairs in the basement for many years, so we had never hung out in the basement alone. Eventually, she did something and kind of left it at a friend's house after a sleepover. Pretty sure the girl doesn't even know that she has it. After that, her basement didn't seem creepy anymore, and we never woke up at 3 a.m. to that site again. there might be a spirit following and pranking me. I've always been able to see, hear, and feel ghosts and spirits since I was a kid. My ability isn't quite strong, so it doesn't happen all of the time, but I've for the most part gotten used to it, and have had contacts and actually made me laugh too. With that said, I think there may be something following me, but I'm not totally sure yet. The first incident happened earlier this week. I was in my bed laying down and browsing Facebook when I heard a dog whining, literally right next to my face. We had 3 dogs, 2 smaller and 1 medium-sized one. The smaller dogs usually sleep in the bed with me, while the mid-sized dog sleeps in my husband's room. The thing is, all 3 dogs were not in the room with me at the time. Mid-sized dog was in hubby's room, while smaller dogs were hanging out with hubby in the living room. I sat up in the double check, and sure enough, no dog in my bed or room. I called out to them, and one of them ran down the hallway and into the room, and a few seconds later, the other one came too. I didn't think more and told them to go to sleep, so they did. Last night, as I was leaving my sister's house, I did what I always do. I turned on the porch light, opened the door, and looked down to get a key out of my purse. As I was doing that, I felt a presence, and at the same time, a kissing sound right in front of me. It literally made me stumble back and look up in shock. Naturally, there was nothing. It spooked me enough that I quickly put the key in the lock, closed the door, locked it, and left. All without turning off the porch light. Sorry, sis. I haven't been spooked like this in quite a while now. Last time last year at the old office building, which I actually didn't mind most of the time, since most of the time they were quite juvenile. This time it didn't feel malicious either, but both incidents were loud enough to catch my attention.